How does the Orthodox Church understand war and peace? Can violence ever be justified, like defending the innocent? How do we reconcile loving our enemies with war? And how should we respond to criticisms about events like the Crusades?
So I really like this question about war and peace and pacifism. As somebody who actually I even practice jujitsu in my private life, right? So, which is a martial art, and so a lot of people have asked me, how do you square that with being a priest? How can you practice quote unquote violence and also advocate for what Christ taught, right? So this is kind of interesting because I think a lot of people they misunderstand what Christ says in the Bible uh, about violence and about loving your neighbors. Yes, he does say that we should love our enemies and pray for those who hurt and persecute us, right? However, this is not like meant to be a blanket statement against, for example, anybody who would ever hurt us ever. Like there are nuances to this discussion, and especially since we know that we live in a fallen world, we know that not everything is always black and white. And just because Jesus doesn't speak about something or doesn't, explore every permutation of every situation that's happening within the world and within our lives, doesn't mean that the church does not extrapolate these types of things. So I'll give you an example. We say that murder, for example, is bad because in the Ten Commandments, God says, "Thou shalt not murder." But the word in the ancient Greek is murder. Murder is different than killing, for example. Like, of course, we don't want to kill anybody either. I'm not saying that. But the term murder is like a premeditated act to hurt another human being out of malice. It is not the same as, for example, self-defense. It is not the same as going to war and defending your home or your country or even defending your family, for example, from a home invader, for example. This is not the same thing. Of course, we don't want to kill anybody. We don't want to take the life of anyone else. All life is sacred. But murder, as it's defined in the Ten Commandments, is different, that term, than all killing. Nowhere does it say that all killing is bad in the Bible, right? And so I'm not saying that this is a free-for-all that Christians should go out and kill people, but the church understands, and even the Bible understands, that there is nuance within the conflicts that we have in our societies, right? And so how does that translate into very practical realities? Well, we understand that, okay, nobody wants to commit violence against somebody else. But like the question says, what happens when we have a duty to protect the innocent, right? There's a difference between the duty that I have to myself and then when I have other innocent people that are placed under my care. I always love this beautiful quote from the life of Saint Nectarios, right? Saint Nectarios, who was a very, very modern saint, in his life, he was persecuted by the church, by the hierarchy of the church, because they were jealous of him and his sanctity. And so when he was persecuted personally, he never said anything. He turned the other cheek. He bore all of it with silence. He never defended himself. He never spoke out against the hierarchy. However, later in his life, when he established a female monastery in Egina, and then at one point the monastery was being threatened by certain hierarchs who wanted to take it over and to destroy that ministry, he actually went against the Holy Synod in Greece and protected the monastery from them by incorporating it as a non-profit organization. It was the first actually instance in the history of the church where a monastery was incorporated as a non-profit entity. So some of his followers, they came to him and they said, Your Grace, in all your life, you never fought back. You were always treated so badly by the church. But now, when the church comes after, when certain people in the church come after your monastery, you're fighting back. Why are you fighting back now, but you never fought back for yourself? And his answer was very, very telling. He said, when people attack you personally, you turn the other cheek. But when people attack your children, you fight. And I think the reason why he says that is that I have free will and I can choose whether I want to give up my own life for any particular situation, right? If somebody breaks into my house and I'm alone and the assailant comes in and I decide that I want to give up my life and not fight that person, right? That's my choice. But if my family is in the house and I am tasked with protecting them and they haven't chosen to give up their lives, they want to live, then I have a duty to protect them. And so things are not always black and white. And it's the same thing with war and peace and all these kind of things that we kind of we think about in the abstract unless we've actually lived through these situations, right? The only reason why we are free here to kind of sit and have these debates is because we have people in the army, we have people who are willing to put their lives on the line to keep us safe, to protect our way of life here, to protect our society, right? And so people really need to think these things through instead of kind of thinking in kind of abstract absolutes, right? That The faith is very, very nuanced. We have guidelines, of course, compassion, love, forgiveness. All these things Christ tells us are the ideals, right? And we should practice them. But other people also have free will, and there are people who misuse their free will to hurt the innocent and to attack. Does that mean that we allow them? Does that mean that we do not, for example, arrest criminals in society and put them in prison? Do we allow them to run rampant and kill people and do all of these other horrible things? No, we incarcerate them. Why? Not because we don't love them, but because we need to protect the greater society from such people. So again, there's a balance, and I think that it's not a black and white issue.